All right, so this question is about the income capitalization approach. You may see one of these on there, but this question is important because it's going to cover a bunch of things that we need to know. In the previous video, we talked about gross potential income and effective gross income, and those two metrics are used in the income capitalization approach. Those are the first two things that you got to figure out in that approach. So reading this question, it says a property is being appraised using the income capitalization approach. Let me fix this here. Annually, it has a gross potential income of $30,000, vacancy and credit loss of $1,500, and operating expenses of $10,000. Now, in the previous question that we answered, we did up to here, but we didn't talk anything about operating expenses. Here's a rule for using the income capitalization approach. Rule number one, you only use the capitalization rate on the net operating income. Now, why are you doing this? It said it in the first line. It says a property is being appraised using the income capitalization approach. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to value a property based on the income. So before we can come up with that value, we gotta account for certain things because the value of a prop we gotta account for expenses, and the value of the property should be accounted for without the expenses included. What are some of the expenses? You might have vacancy, you might have credit loss, you might have maintenance and stuff like that. So let's go to the next portion of that. Let's cover this last section of this whole analysis. Because remember, we're trying to value a property. So some things we got to account for. And I'm gonna pull back up that spreadsheet that I had up. All right. So we right now we should know what gross potential income. That's all the income that the property is able to produce. That's these two numbers right here. That's why it's called right here on this line, gross potential income, right? Now, looking at vacancy and credit loss. Well, we got to take out vacancy and credit loss. And when we do, we get a new definition called the effective gross income. When you hear effective gross income, you should say that's gross potential income minus vacancy and credit loss. That's the definition of effective gross income. That's where we stopped at with that last problem. But then we got a bunch of other stuff that we got to account for. So if we got a building, we probably are going to have to pay electricity. You say, hell no, why won't the tenants pay electricity? I'm not talking about their electricity. We still got hallways. We still got common areas of that building. We might have to light the exterior of the building, and that's going to be on our separate meter. So we got to pay for that. The tenant shouldn't have to pay for that. That's not part of what they're renting. All right. So you have to have that separately metered, and you as the owner will incur that expense. All right. As the owner, you have to pay for that. So we got to account for electricity. Gas. You got to heat those areas too. You got to heat the hallway. You got to heat the basement. So you got to provide gas to the building. Now, if the building has a boiler, that's going to be on you because you can't separately meter a boiler, the gas with the boiler. All right, that's going to be on you. So you got to pay a gas bill. You are going to pay water and sewer as well. So you got to account for the water and sewer bill. You got to manage the property and maintenance the property. So you got to come up with the total for the management and maintenance. In other words, you got to account for all of the expenses that's associated with that property. You might have advertising for that property, you might have legal for that property, whatever. But all of those expenses, when they're added up, in this instance, it came to $424,000, $833 for this property. And by far the biggest expense is property taxes. All right. So once we account for all of these expenses, we get a new definition called net operating income. And that's what we capitalize to come up with the value of the property. That's why this is all so important. right? So let's go over this again. Income, gross potential income means all the income that the property is capable of producing. Apartment income, it might be parking included in there. It might be laundry facilities included in there. It's a bunch of stuff that you can get from income right here. So whatever that is, for this property, it was $642,720. This is a 60-unit apartment building. I'm only using this just to show y'all this. I would never use a 60-unit apartment building to explain it, but I already had this done for a guy that I did this for. So this building has the potential of producing $642,720. Now, that's what we call gross potential income. Then we had to account for vacancy and income or credit loss. Well, this building had a 6% vacancy, so we counted for that. We took that out of this number, and now we have our gross effective income. All right. With that, I mean effective gross income. I'm sorry, effective gross income. What does effective gross income means? That means gross potential income minus vacancy and credit loss. That's what gross potential income is. So now we're going to come up with the net operating income. What does net operating income? It means the gross income, gross potential income, minus the effective gross income, minus all of the expenses that's associated with the building. That's what net operating income means. So in this instance, this building, at the end of the day, after all of the expenses and everything is accounted for, this person has a net operating income of $179,324. All right. So, let me see. I'm wondering why this is so high. Oh, okay. I see what it is. Okay, I'll fix that once. I'll fix that later. And so all we need to know is that this number, this net operating income, is what we capitalize. All right. I wanted to explain that to y'all, but because for the test, I don't think any of this stuff is it's a really, really technical academic exercise, but the way they're giving it to you, they're expecting you to know all of these different nuances, and that's what I'm trying to explain to y'all. So the net operating income is what we're going to capitalize. And so let's go back to the question. So I just wanted to explain that to y'all so y'all can see it, like literally see it done and worked out. This is how it'll look. And so going back to the question, it says a property is being income using the income is being appraised using the income capitalization approach. Annually it has gross potential income of 30,000. So what we're going to do is we're going to go down here. Remember our rule: we use the capitalization rate on only the net operating income. So let's go down here. Let's break out our problem. It says net gross potential income, or PGI. We'll use that, equals 30,000. We're going to get rid of that part of the question. Vacancy and credit loss of 1,500. Right? We're going to get rid of that part of the question. And operating expenses of 10,000. All right, so we know based on that sheet I just showed you, we need to subtract the vacancy and credit loss from this and the operating expenses. So let's do that. 30,000 minus 1,500 equals 28,500. All right, so that's the answer to there. So then we're going to do 28,500 minus 10,000, and that equals 18,500. All right, so our net operating income, because that's what that means. Net operating income means gross potential income minus vacancy and credit loss minus operating expenses. And we know we capitalize net operating income. So the net operating income for this building is $18,500. Right? Now, it says using a capitalization rate of 9%, what is the indicated value to the nearest thousand? Well, when we get to here, we capitalized. When you capitalize, now we need to look at the capitalization formula. Let's just do that. I'm gonna just show you right on the screen. We're gonna look at the formula. And it should be right. Well, let me move over because I saw it earlier when we was going through that thing. Let's go back up. I think it was on page 68 or something like that. 78. Okay. Was it 78? Oh, it's up here, son. Okay, here we go. All right. Income capitalization formula. All right. Annual net operating income divided by the value. Okay, hold on. Let's see here. Value, annual operating income. This is what we're trying to do because they remember they says we're appraising it. So here's the formula that we're going to use. There's three formulas that you can use for net operating income capitalization. If you're looking for the value, you use this formula. If you're looking for the capitalization rate, you use this formula. If you're looking for the annual net operating income, you use this formula, right? So they're asking us what's the value of the property. So we're going to use this formula. Value equals annual operating income divided by the capitalization rate. So going back to our problem here on the sheet, our net operating income is 18,500. So it said that we divide that by the capitalization rate. So we're just going to take divided by, they said the capitalization rate was 9. I should have actually put that down here somewhere. Probably here. We'll do it right here. I'll just put it down here. Hold on. Because when we break out our problem, we want to account for everything. Cap rate equals 9%. All right. So the cap rate is 9%. So now the equation says take the annual operating income, the net operating income divided by 9%. We go to our calculator and divide it by 9%, and that's the value of the property. So let's do that. We're going to take 18,500 and divide by 9. 18,500 divided by 9%, or 9. Yeah, 9%. We can do 9%. Equals the value of that building is $205,555. Now they said round to the nearest thousand, so this is going to be $206,000 based on what they said right here when in the question. All right, let me get back to my screen here on that. So the answer is, let me get back to the calculator, $206,000. That's what it equals. It equals 205.555, but it said round to the nearest thousand right here, up here, round to the nearest thousand. So that was the answer, but rounded, it's 206,000. All right. So that's the answer. All right. So let's go to the back of the book and see if that's the answer. Now, there's a couple other things I want to tell you about on that when we once we check the answer. All right, so let's go to the back of the book. That was question 10.1. Yeah, I think that was question 10.13. Let's go check the answer in the back of the book. 10.13. All right, right here. 10.1, this is our question. 206,000 is A. And let's go check the answer in the back of the book. It's up here. We said A is the answer. Right here, A is the answer. 206. Remember the formula. Now, don't, this is too technical, so I wouldn't say remember this, but because we already got a better formula. All right. It says here, first identify the net income by subtracting out the vacancy and expenses. Then divide by the capitalization rate. And here's our math is going to look just like us. 30,000 minus 1,500 minus 10,000 divided by 9% equals 205,555 or 206 rounded. The value of this property, once you account for the expenses, is $206,000. Right? Now you can play around with the expenses. Okay, what if we had more expenses? What if we had less vacancy? And you could play around with these things, but a lot of these things are objective numbers. The expenses for a property, you can take a 3-year trend and kind of come up with an average and do it that way. You can use the actual expenses, but really what you're supposed to do a lot of times is to get like a 3-year trend of the property, figure out what the expenses are, figure out what the vacancy and credit loss is, and use a composite number from those 3 years, and then you have a more accurate indicator because you don't want to reward the property in a real good year when the expenses were low, and you don't want to penalize the property in a bad year when the expenses were high. That's why you want to look at multiple years, and you can kind of say, okay, well, damn, the expenses this year was only $7,000. And so I'm going to use that number. But then you say, man, well, expenses this year was $13,000. So but if you use a multiple years, it'll balance itself out to kind of tell you over a multiple year look. That's how you look at investment properties. So the answer to this question is 206,000. And this is because I'll give you an example, and y'all probably will do this because some people still doing it to me now. They'll call me. I got a call the other day. It was like a 6 or 8 unit apartment building. Hey, Han, I need comps for it. Ain't no comps for that building because it's not going to be enough of them sold within a certain area. Those types of buildings don't sell every day. You might have 1 or 2 sales of an 8 or 10 suiter in a certain neighborhood a year. And a lot of times what we see in Cleveland is that they're distressed, so they need work. So they're not really even similar in condition. And so there's no comps for a 6 or 8 unit. You got to use the income capitalization approach to figure out what you think the value of that building is. All right. And that's what this approach that we use. So, what's the gross potential amount of that money that that building can make? What is the vacancy and credit loss average in this market? Certain markets, like you might be in Cleveland, and they might have like a 10% vacancy rate, whereas you might be looking at a property in Lakewood and it ain't no vacancies. So, you don't want to be comparing a building in Cleveland to a building in Lakewood in terms of the vacancy because they're totally different. So all of this stuff is what you're going to have to do. To me, this is too academic for somebody that's getting a real estate license, but it looks like this stuff is going to be on the test. And if it is on the test, it's simple math. If you break out the question, like I said, because at the end of the day, we only subtracted and divided in that question. We just got to know how to organize the little mini math questions to get to the answer. But more importantly, we got to know what the definitions of some of this math stuff is because a lot of it just simple math. It really is just a lot of simple math computations. So let me go back. Last thing that I'm gonna do and talk about is um, this right here. So notice the relationship of the cap rate. Watch what happens to the value of the cap rate when it goes up. The cap rate or the capitalization rate has a negative relationship with value. What I mean by that, if the cap rate goes up, the value goes down. If the cap rate goes down, the value goes up. I tell people to look at the cap rate as a risk. The more riskier something is, the less it's going to be worth to me as an investor. So if the cap rate goes up, that means that the risk went up. So now I'm not going to pay as much for that property as I would have if it went down. So watch this. I want y'all to do 2 things before we leave and tell me what the answer is. Go 18.5 divided by 10%. I mean 9%. Oh yeah, 10%. Right off the bat, should know what that answer is. It's going to be $185,000 or something like. Let's go 18.5. Let's just do the math instead of guesswork. 18.5 is going to be less divided by 10%. $185,000. So that's the answer. You see, when the cap rate went up, right? Like that 1% change just lowered the value of that property by almost $21,000 because the risk went up by 1%. Now let's see what happens when the cap rate goes down. So we're gonna take this and we're gonna do 18.5 divided by 8%. So look, let's go to our calculator, type that in. 18.5. Y'all type that into your calculator, 18.5 divided by 8%. What happens to the value? The value now goes to 231,250. So when the cap rate went down, it went to 231,250, I think. That was what it said on the calculator. 231,250. So now 231,250, if the cap rate went down, you would have gained about $21,000. You see that? Actually, you'd have gained a little bit more, about $25,000. And if when it went down, you lost $21,000. But let's see the relationship between all of this adjustment. 185 divided by 205,555. Let's see what that number comes out to. And there's a reason why I'm doing this. 185 divided by 205,555. That equals not 0.9. Okay? 0.9. All right, now let's take 205,555 and divide it by the 231. And it's a reason I'm doing this. What I want to show, this is not going to be on the test, but this is just game that you're going to know when you see something happen. All right. So let's go again. Let's look at our calculator, and we're going to go 205,555 divided by 231,250. And that equals 0.89. So on one end it equal 0.9 and the other end it equal 0.89, or about 90%. Here's a rule of thumb, another rule. And this is not going to be on the test, but this is just game about when you, because you're going to have to do it as you get savvier. You're going to be valuing properties using the cap rate. Rule of thumb. A 1% change in cap rate equals about a 10% reduction or increase in value. What that means is when I got this number, this 206, I know if I up the cap rate, this number is going to appreciate by 10,000. I mean, by 10%. And if I up the cap rate, is going to lower the value by 10%. And if I drop the cap rate, it's going to raise the value by 10%. Because both of those numbers had about a 10% relationship between, if it goes up a percent, you could just look at this number, 206. Watch this, 206. Let's do it on the calculator. 206 times 10%. That's 20,600. Let's minus that from 206. Minus from 206. That equals 185,400. Right? So if we raise the cap rate by a percent, it's about a 10% difference. So you really, like, if you know the cap rate, here's where you apply it. Like, okay, man, if we could get this thing at an 8% cap rate, I'm gonna just add 10% to that number. So I know, shit, it's gonna be about 10% of 206. That's gonna be what, 20,600. So I know that value is gonna be somewhere around 230,000. But if I raise it to 10%, I know my value is gonna go down by about 10%. So what it means is a 1% change in the cap rate is about a 10% change or decrease in value, up or down. So when y'all get the questions, the reason why I'm saying that is you'll get a question on the test and it'll say something like the cap rate changed and went down. What's the effect on the value? Or something like that. It'll be something like that on the test. So, but all of this still is like simple math. And what we talked about today is we talked about a lot of stuff today. So these are some decent videos for us to watch. But like some of this stuff, like, man, income capitalization approach, you might get one question, but to me, it's very technical at understanding this stuff. So I don't know why they're testing new realtors on income capitalization approach. And very likely you're going to start out with single family homes. You might start out with a double or something. Do you need to use the income capitalization approach with the doubles? Not necessarily, but it would be nice if you knew it, because there are enough of doubles in the marketplace that have sold for you to extrapolate value just by looking at comps. But the income capitalization approach is used when there's an income producing properties and there's not a whole lot of comps similar to that property in the marketplace. So, but we got to the answer. We understand that the answer for this question was 206,000, and it's just simple math. It's just knowing what to do with these little math questions, each question. And the way we get to that is we just simply break it out on. We just break the question out. All right. So, this was a good class. This was a real good class. I'm gonna post these videos to YouTube, and I'll share the links with y'all once I do that. But any questions or anything, y'all? Y'all good?
No questions. It was good. I like it.
Yeah,
All
I'm
right,
good.
all right, ladies. Enjoy the rest of y'all weekend.
You
You
too.
too.
And
You too. Thank you.
I'll see y'all Monday.
All
All
righty.
right.
Yep.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.